Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the GallowgateShots podcast and YouTube channel. I am your host, as always, Chris, joined by a special guest this evening. It is Keith Downie back in the studio with us. We were just talking beforehand when the last time you were here, and those listening, you might be able to help us out because we couldn't figure out if it was pre or post takeover. I've got a feeling it might have been post.
I thought it was before, but it feels like a long time ago. When I drove into the car park just now, I was thinking, God, it feels like a different lifetime ago that I was here. So I don't know. Listen, a lot's happened since the takeover, so it could have been. But I don't know. I might be wrong. I felt like when I was here, like things weren't that happy, and we were trying to cheer. I don't know, mate.
The only thing which I'm thinking might have been post takeover is because what you were in and you were talking about transfers.
Right.
So we probably wouldn't have been talking about transfers.
Oh no. We were always talking about transfers. They were just never happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is true. Those that are listening live, I am going to open this up to use as well, and Keith's happy to go through questions which you send in as well. So as many as possible, the more the merrier, and we'll try and fire through, like I said, as many as possible. I'm going to take you back a little bit, Keith. You were there pre-season with the lads, so it was quite a working holiday for yourself, wasn't it?
A working holiday. You know, even you get that now. Obviously, away in Dortmund a couple of weeks ago, and then going to Paris next week. People keep saying, "Oh, enjoy your holiday." I'm like, right, okay, it's a holiday for the fans who are going over there because they're having a great time. For me, the more people that are there, the more there is, the more kind of that's riding on it, the more work you have to do.
Yeah.
In terms of pre-season, yeah, look, there wasn't a lot of stress, shall we say, with it because it was pre-season and there wasn't like a big tournament up for grabs or a high pressure game. So it was probably a bit more chilled. It didn't help that halfway through the trip, I badly injured my ankle, and it's still not right today.
Was that the Rocky steps?
Yeah, no,
Was it the
it
Rocky
was.
steps
It was actually the day after.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, and before you ask, I wasn't hungover. I was hungover the day after the Rocky steps, and then the day after that, I actually went to the gym. Would you believe? And I was walking out the gym, and I was reading an email, and I was like, "What?" And I wasn't concentrating, and I think I had 3 steps left, and I thought I only had 1, and I went over my ankle, and for the next. Well, I think we're still away for another 2 weeks. So for the rest of the trip, I was just in a lot of pain. Every time I went up in the air on a flight, whether it was like, because we had to keep getting these domestic flights to Atlanta and then to New York and then Washington, every time I went up, it just massively swelled. So anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you that, but basically it's still not right. So I'm still troubled by it. But the trip in general,
Were you covering just Newcastle? Or was
No,
it
I was.
Premier League series?
Yeah, I was doing it all. Yeah, so obviously there were 6 clubs out there. I mean, we didn't do too much Brentford or Brighton. It was mainly Newcastle and Chelsea, and then probably to a slightly lesser extent Aston Villa.
Is that? I'm not being harsh to any of the other fans of those clubs. Is that because of the desire of content from those fans that are watching that, or is that just because it's the big boy sort of thing?
Nah, it's just we know, we can see from our viewing figures who watches what and who watches why. We can see it on our online content. I mean, just to give you an example now, after all the Champions League games, the reporter who covers the club or covers the game has to do a little sum up of the match. Just like, so it's me stood there in Dortmund the other week talking to the camera for like 5 minutes about the game and what it means, and one of our online guys contacted me and said, like, the 3 that you've done this season or four now, the 2 Dortmund games, the PSG home match, and the so how many games has it been? 3 so far. I'm losing track. How many? I'm Milan away. 4. I'm losing track with the amount of games.
Milan away.
Do you know what
Milan at home.
Yeah, the schedule is just becoming ridiculous, and I'm kind of losing track of what's happened and what's not. But anyway, those the 4 that I've done for the games, they said the actual viewing figures and the people who've clicked on it, like by far and away, outweighed anything from the other clubs in the Champions League.
Really?
So it shows the interest for Newcastle and the fan base just now, and a real kind of thirst for information. So with regards to pre-season, Chelsea and Newcastle are just a bigger draw, and then Aston Villa to a slightly lesser extent, but we were going quite big in Villa. Also, it was who was doing business. Like Newcastle signed Harvey Barnes out there, so that was quite a big news story at the time. Chelsea were trying to sign Caicedo from Brighton, and Brighton were there, and I did the Chelsea-Brighton game, and Caicedo was walking past in the mix zone afterwards, and you could see the Chelsea owners, and it was just this weird, awkward moment. So there was a few news stories around it. they weren't too bothered about Brentford because they weren't really doing too much.
yeah.
And then I think, was it Fulham was the other team? So, listen, it was good. I got to see parts of America that I've never been to, and it was an amazing experience. It was full on in terms of me covering all those teams. I would have loved it, like quite a lot of my colleagues who cover Newcastle, you know, Lee Ryder at the Chronicle, Craig Hope at the Daily Mail, George Calkin at the Athletic. They were there just purely to cover Newcastle.
Just following the club.
Yeah, they were just doing Newcastle, and for them it was probably a little bit easier. They got a bit more downtime. For me, I was kind of getting pulled in different directions, but we were helped by the fact that quite often the clubs were all in the same place.
Yeah.
So, like, I remember we sat before one game, or before one weekend, I think it was the Philadelphia doubleheader, and we sat in the press room, and like literally all 4 managers and captains were just stood in the corridor waiting to get in, one after the other. And I think one of the clubs got caught in traffic, and I think Eddie and Jamal Lascelles were stood outside waiting alongside Pochettino and Raheem Sterling, and everyone was just queued up, right? So in a way, like, we actually got through quite a lot of work in just a small window of time. So listen, it was good. It was an amazing trip. Saw some great places, met some amazing people as well. Some of the Newcastle fans we met in Atlanta, in New Jersey, everywhere really, just like everywhere you went.
Were you shocked about the fan base over there?
I mean,
how intense it was.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't massive. You know, I mean, I've covered a couple of Rangers trips before in America and Vegas, and I was like, wow, I can't believe there's so many. It wasn't massive, but it felt as though it was growing. Like it felt like it's growing. I found them very knowledgeable and very. It was almost as though, like, when I met the guys from Atlanta, it was almost like, it felt like we walked in this boozer in Atlanta one night, and it was one of these unofficial parties, and it felt like you were just walking into the Strawberry.
Yeah.
Like it felt as like it was proper Newcastle fans. It wasn't just people jumping on the bandwagon. It felt like it was people who've supported them through
for a long time,
the bad time as well. There weren't a huge amount, but it really felt like it was growing. The one thing I was really surprised with over there, I did the Wrexham Chelsea match before the Premier League summer series started. There were as many Wrexham fans at that match as there were Chelsea, and obviously that's due to the owners and what's happening over there with them. But look, there's no doubt there's a big following in America, but I think it will get bigger as times change. And you know, you could tell that they were real fans and they were clued up and they knew everything that we did and all the family. I'm sure you probably get a lot of viewers and, you know, people interested in what you do because they can't. And I found that as well. Like people saying, "Oh, we read all your stuff on Twitter or we watch your stuff on you." And I only started just doing some YouTube videos that summer. Just a couple of months ago that summer, and people were coming, "Oh, I've been watching YouTube." And I'm like, I only started it 2 weeks ago, but there's obviously just like a real appetite for any kind of information, and they seem really knowledgeable with everything that was going on.
It's right what you're saying. The likes of when we look at our stats and stuff, and where you're getting downloads from. Obviously, UK is your biggest one. It's always going to be the case, but then there's a lot in America. America's a close second, to be fair. And one of the lads that does a podcast with us on Monday, he went to the States just as a holiday, and he got spotted in a bar as well, which is really random. Just a Newcastle fan, just because he does this. Yeah. Spotted by a diehard Newcastle United fan as well, which is mental.
I've weirdly noticed, so I've only been doing the YouTube thing for a couple of months, but people keep coming up to me and going, "Oh, I've seen you on YouTube. I've seen you doing stuff." I'm like, "You do know I've been working for Sky Sports for 10 years. "Oh, I've seen your stuff on you. Are you the guy off of YouTube?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." There's 2 guys came up to me at the airport when I went on holiday a couple of weeks ago, and came up to me, "Oh, are you the guy off YouTube?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I've done 10 years of Sky Sports News," and like they're only noticing it from YouTube. But I think it's just people consume the information in different ways.
People getting you and Pete confused, are just people thinking you're the guy off YouTube now.
I know. I actually preferred the Pete analogy.
What was the atmosphere like that over there in the States? Like, obviously we know about the fan base and things like that, but amongst the squad, can you really see that togetherness in the squad firsthand?
Yeah, I mean, like, you see it on a daily basis at the training ground. Like, I didn't need to go to America to see that myself. Like, I see that from the interviews. We do interviews on a weekly basis with the players, and although you're not sat with them for hours on end, or you're not sat in the dressing room, you see enough to know that the atmosphere is good. Little things. Today I'm down at Leeds. I had to go down to Leeds United, and I bump into Carl Darlow in the car park outside, and he comes over, and I stood chatting to him for about 20 minutes, and he's asking about the players and this, that, and you know, and it just you can tell even the players who've left recently, there's a togetherness within the camp there, and I've always felt from certainly in the 10 years I've been here, probably for about 7 or 8 of them, there's been a real want for good characters. That's something, you know, Eddie Howe is trying to do. I actually felt Steve Bruce tried to do that as well, and I think a lot of the guys he brought in most of them were decent characters as well, and I feel that has been, I feel under Mike Ashley, think the managers knew that they had to get the characters right and the players right, because they knew that there was things going on behind the scenes that weren't that great. I think when you look at the players Eddie Howe's brought in, they are all good. I mean, you could go through that squad, and if you ever needed a favour or you needed someone to do an interview with you last minute, or they would all do it. They're good. They're good. They're guys playing in the Champions League, but without a Champions League mentality.
Yeah.
When I say mentality, I mean ego. Sorry, they have a mentality, but they don't have that ego that goes along with it.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense, to be fair. And I think we highlighted ages ago that Eddie Howe's base model was to bring in the right character first of all. It just helps that he's bringing in great talents as well, along with it.
Yeah, and I think that's the aim. It's not just to bring characters. It's someone who's got a bit of everything. Over there in America, they did an open day in Atlanta where they invited all the fans in, and I mean the fans who had travelled there, and then the local fans. I don't think they could believe what they were seeing. They were just like, wow, and the players couldn't have. They were there. I mean, must have been about 35 degrees. It was 40 degrees.
Gutted, it was one of those moments where you're thinking, they're getting to go and watch a training session and interact with the players and that.
I did think that. I thought the amount of Newcastle fans back home here in the northeast who would give their right arm for that, and there's fans over there who, they were getting their moment, but the players were just standing chatting away to them for ages, and it wasn't just like they would chat to Sven Botman for 10 minutes, and then he'd walk on and they would chat to Isak for 10 minutes, and then Matt Ritchie would come along, and then Nick Pope, and it was just this. I don't think they could believe what was happening. I actually met. The night before that, I was out for dinner, and this guy came up to me and he goes, "Hi Keith, how you doing?" He goes, "I'm Max Milburn. I'm the grandson of Jackie, or great grandson of Jackie." Did you put something on social media? And he told me, and his dad was in. His dad was the grandson, and he was a great grandson, and it was an amazing story. And I got chatting away to him. They're a really nice family. And they're like, "We really want to go to the training session tomorrow, but we can't get tickets." So I managed to speak to the club and I got them in. I said, "Right, you can come along, but you're carrying our bags in for us." So they helped us with our equipment. They were so nice, lovely, lovely family. And they came in and they were just like, "Wow, is this?" And I don't know. It just had a real kind of, the whole thing just kind of had a real sort of family feel about it. And the club were very open, and I think they're trying to reach out to the fans who are there and trying to get new fans on board. And as I've said already, I think as time goes on, it's going to be a snowball effect, and they're just going to get more and more.
It's surreal, like, because I've been at the training ground before, and it was when Rafa was there. And it just, obviously, it wasn't the same. Obviously, Rafa came and had a good conversation with us. There was probably about 6 of them. But the players just weren't interested.
They're not.
Nah, it was just like normal run of the day sort of thing. And I think the only one that came over was Perez. Perez made an effort and came over and had a chat with her. The rest of them just in and out.
I mean, they were all in amongst them for an hour. The only thing that stopped it was the weather was so hot. Like it was really actually difficult to sort of stand around in it too long, and I think that was the only thing that brought it to a close. But the players had all the time to chat away, and they were sharing jokes with them and whatnot. But I think a lot of that comes down to, if you think about when you visited the club, like things weren't good, and players can get a little bit sort of embarrassed, or maybe they're annoyed about the way they're performing, the team's performing, they maybe don't want to front up to fans. They look at the fans there and think they're probably the fans that are abusing us at the weekend, whereas the players who are playing now know right now the fans absolutely adore them. They're kind of walking on water, and there's not really anything they can.
It was towards the end of Rafa's tenure at the club as well, and it was a bit toxic anyway. Obviously with all the headlines and that, but it's a lot more positive these days. It is. I'm going to start going through some of the questions. The first one is from Joe. That says, "Hi Keith, what's the biggest change you've noticed in your job covering Newcastle since the takeover?"
Well,
Champions League's obvious.
There's loads. There's loads. I mean, the positivity. I'm suddenly, waking up thinking I've got some positive things to talk about now, or lots of positive things. Whereas before, I felt like it was a sort of political minefield. You were trying not to upset anyone too much, but trying to get the news out there. And honestly, like it is for you guys as fans, for me in my job as well, you were existing. You were just getting by. You were just trying to get to the next window, hoping things would get a bit better. And I remember the window in COVID when the club signed Callum Wilson, Ryan Fraser and Jamal Lewis, and I thought, wow, this is great. And looking back now, when you think about that compared to, it's night and day. We thought that was positive at the time, and it's night and day compared to what it is now. I think the biggest thing for me, and it's a pretty obvious one to say, but the workload. So there's a real kind of appetite now from Sky Sports and Sky Sports News in particular to have me on as much as possible. So if there's a story happening like the Tonali one a couple of weeks ago, I don't think I was off the TV for about 10 days. When the takeover went through, I think I did 87 lives in the space of a week, like live hits. I was exhausted. So the workload, there's a lot more to do, but I would rather that. I don't want to be forgotten about in the background.
Yeah.
I don't want to just be, popping up on a Friday for a press conference and that's all. I want to be busy. I mean, you look at the schedule for the next 5-6 weeks up until the turn of the year, and Newcastle don't have a free midweek. It's going to be weekend, midweek, weekend, all the way through. Now, while that's busy for the players and the staff, that's the same for us guys who are covered. We're going to have to go to all those games as well. I'm not saying we have to go, but it's quite taxing after a while. And I did a live a couple of Fridays ago, press conference on the Friday morning. It was like 7:30 a.m. and I got a message from one of my producers saying, "Keith, are you okay?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Are you feeling okay?" I said, "I'm just exhausted." It was just after the Dortmund trip. I said, "I'm exhausted. I've not stopped for weeks." And he said, I could tell. You looked at it on TV. I was like, all right, we're going to have to get some more makeup set up. But yeah, look, it's the workload. But listen, I'm not complaining. I've wanted it to be like that for a long time. And, there's probably certain things in my work at the moment which aren't really going for me. But the one thing that is going for me is the fact that the story's a good one. It's a positive one. It's fun to be talking about the club again, and everyone likes it. I'm looking forward to the January transfer window. Especially,
that's going to be my next question.
Yeah, especially after the news yesterday about the ruling, the loan ruling. I'm now looking at January, thinking, oh, hang on, that brings a whole new meaning to January. What could happen? Whereas before that, I was thinking, oh, they're going to have to be creative here to sign anyone. Whereas now, that's maybe opening up an avenue for them to.
Are you surprised? And we'll talk about the Premier League vote, which has happened, and I think was a 13 against it now, or something daft like that. The number changed last night, didn't it?
Yeah, I think it was. I think the vote for the loan was 12-8.
Yeah.
I think the other, which was the sponsorship and fair market value, I think the vote was 13-7. But listen, it doesn't matter. They were both very close to not being.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, they were both very close to being passed through, which would mean that Newcastle they would have to take a step back. But now they're in a position where, wow, what did he do in January? Because this is, for me now, looking at it, it's a window of opportunity.
Are you surprised that obviously I know you work in the media as well? Do you think the reason Newcastle are on those headlines is because of that relationship that Newcastle have with Saudi and how they're leagued? As in, what I mean by headlines is that Newcastle led. That's what I say. Newcastle led vote and things.
Well, listen,
like
let's be honest. This meeting is only taking place because of Newcastle.
Yeah, of course.
Why has it not happened before? Why didn't it happen this time last year?
Yeah.
Or why didn't it happen? The last time they met in March or April towards the end. Why has it not happened then? It's only happened now because they've been alerted to it, right? And they're aware of it. And that's why it's happened. So the Premier League have obviously wanted to put a stop to that, but they've not managed to get the backing that they thought from the other clubs. And it's actually not that surprising when you look at it, because I think originally I thought, how many clubs are actually affiliated with others? But when you look, actually the majority of them are.
Yeah, most of them. I think Palace have got links with a French club, and I think Palace didn't actually vote against it, to be honest with you. But like, so you've got Newcastle, you've got Man City,
Palace. I think Palace were one of the ones who actually voted for the ban.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But you look at clubs like, Nottingham Forest, like they quite often loan players from Olympiacos, and they've got a tie in there at Olympiacos. You look at Chelsea. I mean, we don't know what Chelsea are doing in terms of transfers at the moment. They're going to be close to financial fair play soon as well, and they might have to be creative. Okay, then you look at Man City. The Man City one's a strange one for me, but I think Man City look at it and think, the Man City at this moment in time really feel challenged by Newcastle. I think we'll all put our hands up and admit Newcastle are doing great and huge strides, but they're still miles away from where Manchester City are winning the treble last season. And I don't think Man City probably look at Newcastle as a rival at this moment in time, certainly for the title, and certainly not this season with the Champions League and the schedule that Newcastle have got. And then you look at Sheffield United, and Sheffield United are owned by a Saudi group. So that might be part of the reason why they've they've sort of helped out Newcastle there.
But were you shocked that the vote didn't go through against it?
Uh,
Because I was. If I'm being
I
honest.
wasn't shocked. I was surprised. I think if you'd asked me this question, the same question last week, I would have said no chance. There's no way that's getting passed. There's no way that will get passed through. There's going to be a ban.
Yeah.
But then over the last few days, the start of this week and the end of last week, when I started looking at the other clubs and just hearing little bits and pieces from what people were potentially going to do, I thought, hang on, this might not be as cut and dried
Just
as
tip of the iceberg, wasn't it? Newcastle being the spearhead.
and it sounded as though I think Newcastle thought it was going to the wire as well, and there was a lot of sort of frantic calls behind the scenes asking each other what they were going to do. And listen, clubs might have helped each other out who they've got, like as I say, there's a little bit of a relationship there between Sheffield United and Newcastle, but they've ended up doing it with 2 votes to spare. They've ended up getting there with 2 votes to spare. And to go back to your original question, I think I know you're saying Newcastle are the team that are kind of getting named, but I think the reason for that is, one, it was put in for Newcastle because it would have been done beforehand, but secondly, the situation we're in now in January, Newcastle now have the biggest pool of players to select from if they decide to go down this loan route. I mean, PIF own 4 clubs in Saudi, right? I mean, listen, let's speculate here, right? But of those 4 clubs, Cristiano Ronaldo plays for one, Karim Benzema plays for another, right?
There's a good selection there.
Yeah, I mean, some of the biggest players in the world, but those guys aren't going to come to Newcastle, right? But look at guys like Ruben Neves is the one everyone mentions. Is Ruben Neves going to win Newcastle a league title? No, he's not, right? He would come in as a replacement for Tonali until the end of the season, and he'd give them an extra body. Look, he played for Wolves. He didn't pull up any trees there. He was a decent enough player. He'd make Newcastle stronger. Is he really going to? He'd probably help them get a couple of points a season, like over the course of it, but he's not going to win them a title. But you look at some of the other players who are in there, guys like Aymeric Laporte, right, who was at Manchester City. Someone like that's interesting. I would say, with Sven Botman out injured at the moment, left-sided centre-half. You've got that Gabriel Vega, who is a player Newcastle have scouted. Pretty much every other top European club have scouted, was at Celta Vigo. He's gone to Saudi for big money. He's on huge wages there. But someone like him, he would fit the Eddie Howe mould. So, there are players there who could come in. I mentioned Benzema and Ronaldo and Neymar. Neymar's injured, but these guys aren't going to happen.
Fitting well.
I don't know if there's any room for him. But theoretically, there's nothing to stop it happening. It's just I don't think it will. I just can't see Newcastle doing that, because I know the sort of players that the manager wants and doesn't want. He wants young, hungry players. He doesn't want huge, big egos who are going to come in and overpower the.
That could ruin everything.
Yeah,
what Howe's done so far.
But the way it stands just now, that could happen.
Yeah,
it won't. But there's nothing to stop them doing that. So,
do you think because the rumor was that we've seen this before, where the club will put a name out there in the open, just to as a red herring sort of thing, and look elsewhere where everybody's in that direction, they shift off from another. Do you think that's the case? What they've done there, they've obviously put the feelers out there, saying, "Oh, we're going to potentially loan Ruben Neves."
No, Newcastle were interested in Neves before any of this came to the fore. So that would have been last summer.
Last summer, yeah.
Or was it last January? Yeah, they were interested in him then. I mean, we asked Eddie Howe in one of his press conferences just a couple of weeks ago. I think it was the week after we had an interview with Dan Ashworth, and he said, "Look, it's a player we have previously been interested in." So that doesn't mean they can't reignite that in January. They may still do that, and I think the Athletic put a story out in the last 24 hours saying that Newcastle aren't. He's happy at Al Hilal, and Newcastle aren't going to go for him. But look, that could change if Newcastle make a move in January. And you have to say it would be remiss of PIF not to help Newcastle out in January when they've got so many injury issues at the moment. Okay, they might be out of the Champions League by January, but it doesn't matter. You're still going to have a lot of games to play between now and the end of the season, and the priority is to ensure you're back up there. If you're not in the top 4, at least in the top 6, and trying to get up there. So what you don't want now is, with this huge injury list to come, this huge schedule to come, is the season to peter out. And when you look at it, there's a potential of that between now and Christmas if they don't get through these next 6 weeks. So it's going to be by the time the transfer window opens in January, the picture could be completely different. Newcastle could still be in a strong position, or they could be out the Carabao Cup. They could have shuttle down the league a bit, and they could be out the Champions League. They could be out of Europe
completely.
Yeah. I mean, they could be out. They might not even qualify for the Europa League. But
Blue
let's not be negative about it. Let's hope that there's enough within the squad and there's enough fight to get through this difficult spell, and you can get the players back. But I just think, from what we found out yesterday at that meeting, I just think it brings a whole new element to January. I wasn't really looking forward to January. I hate the January transfer window, but now with this, I'm like, oh, hang on, this makes it makes it a little bit more interesting, and I think you guys as fans should be feeling like that as well.
Yeah, of course. I think obviously with the injuries as well, which we'll have, I think the club have to look at something. And obviously the suspension, which we've got for Tonali now, that leaves us a little bit light.
Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody planned for that at all, did they? And I think what's been the most frustrating recently is that when you look at the players who have been injured, and you looked at that Manchester United game at Old Trafford a few weeks ago, Tonali suspended, Murphy was injured, Barnes was injured, and I was looking. It was like all guys. It was all guys who would have come in and played that game. Yeah. It was almost like the 11 were still there, or the best part of the 11. But the kind of guys who'd have come in and they would have freshened the team up, he couldn't do that. And I think that's what's been difficult, is the guys like your Murphys, who would be perfect for a Carabao Cup game, or Barnes, or Tonali, who's just finding his feet, aren't available. And I just think the Tonali thing, it was such a huge chunk of the club's transfer budget in the summer. I mean, £55 million and a player who's not going to be available for the 10.
A lot of work went into that transfer as well.
I mean, it's they've been left with a real bloody nose from that. Like they really have. And look, I don't think it's the last we'll hear of it. But what do you do when a player's got a problem like that? The first thing you do, and Eddie Howe was right, is you have to look after the player. You've got to remember, as a human, as a human being, and at the end of all this, it's criticism. And I think the way the club have handled it has been impeccable. Yes, they probably are disappointed with themselves at the due diligence that they've done. Dan Ashworth said that. He said, look, I question myself. He goes, could have done something better, did I? And he goes, the first person to look at is myself. And I think, you've had a couple of sleepless nights as a result of that. But what do? You have to just get on with it. And,
you've got to do it.
You know what it's like? We'll be sitting here in this exact seat in August at the start of the season going, God, that season went quick, and suddenly Tonali's back available
like
again.
Like signing.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Rob. He says, "Hi Keith, what do you think the What do you think the expectation is from within the club this season?" Because obviously, I think he's referring to the whole plan was to get Champions League football within 4 years. I think it was that man that Stevie said, and winning the Premier League overall. Obviously, that first season shocked everybody because massively ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
Do you think that the club have then gone back to slightly adjust things and think, well, we're ahead of schedule, we'll now start a new project from now? Or do you think the original project is still in place?
I think the original project's in place as a whole, but I think the fact that the club are in the Champions League right now is taking you down a different avenue, and you've kind of gone off on a tangent a little bit. There's an argument to say that actually getting in the Champions League now every year is the best thing for the club financially, with the revenue streams it can bring in, and getting yourself as a club who's in the Champions League year after year, established, that can actually really help with getting revenue into the club, and that's what the club needs more than anything. But it's so hard to keep doing that. It really is. And what you need to remember is, people say to me a lot of the time, they say, why have we hit our FFP already? Like, why have we, like, you look at Chelsea, look at what they're doing, look at Aston Villa, they've signed all these players. What you need to remember is Newcastle have come from nothing, and what I mean by that is they have not been able to trade, so they've not sold anyone other than Chris Woods, who's sold for 15 million, having bought him for 25, so it was a 10 million loss, and John Joe Shelby, which was like I think $1 million. They've not sold, St Maximin in the summer, they've not sold anyone. So they've spent £400 million since the takeover in 4 transfer windows, right? And they've not sold it. They've brought in 40 million, right? So there's a spending of 360 million. Whereas you look at Aston Villa, they sold Jack Grealish a couple of years ago for £100 million. They're probably still spending that money, right? So they're trading, right? And as we've seen with the St Maximin deal, is when you sell a player, it's actually because you can spread it out over the course of you can amortize the deal. Yeah. So they're actually, by trading, you look at Man City. Why do you think Manchester City sold Cole Palmer? They sold him because they know that by selling him for whatever it was, 40 or 50 million pounds, is worth more than that financially to the club. They sold Sterling, they sold Zinchenko, they sold Jesus. all these players. Look at Chelsea. Yes, they bought in 15 players in the summer, but they sold 15 as well. A whole team, you know. Mendy in goals, Mount, who else is, God, I can't even remember. I went through the other day there. I was on another podcast and I was trying to go through all the players at Chelsea. I couldn't even remember them all. There was that many guys like Aubameyang. I don't know if he's still there, but like they're getting guys off the wage bill. They're, you know, big money for Mount, big money for Mendy. Koulibaly was another one. Howe to Newcastle. Like they're getting money coming in, whereas Newcastle aren't getting that money. Coming in to spend, and I think that's what people forget. So because Newcastle were left with players who weren't really worth anything,
no value,
and guys who were coming towards the end of their careers, it was really difficult for them, and it's put the new owners kind of behind the 8 ball before they even
and
start.
that's without even looking at external sponsorship as well. That's all internal. Obviously, the club are trying the hardest right now to bring in those sponsors. I'm saying external. Most of them have been Saudi. Let's be honest. That have came in. But obviously, that's going to continue to grow each season.
But they're with all these deals, they're having to prove fair market value. They're having to do it. And listen, that wasn't the case with Chelsea back in the day or Man City back in the day, but sadly for Newcastle, their takeover just came at the wrong time for them in terms of what they can do financially. But I've said this to some Newcastle fans: what would you rather? You don't want it. You don't want to go from 0 to 100 really fast. Do you not want to enjoy the ride?
Enjoy the ride. I'm the same way.
Do it bit by bit, slowly, and it actually almost drags it out longer. And you rather than just suddenly here you are. And being in the Champions League was, above and beyond what anyone at the club would have expected. I can't see. I'll be very surprised if it happens again this year. I just think with the amount of games that the club have to play, the injury situation they've got right now, and it's not just injuries for a couple of weeks. Some of them are going to be out for 2-3 months or longer. Tonali out for the season. I was looking yesterday. I done a podcast yesterday, and the majority of the injuries which we currently have, they're not due back until the start of next year, which is still 2 months away. And look at how many games there are to play between now and then. So I think it's going to be difficult to qualify for the Champions League again. But I think what it has done, this Champions League run, and what it is doing is it's putting the club back on the map, European. And okay, if you don't get out the group, even if you finish 4th and you go out of Europe completely, it's putting Newcastle United as a club back on the map and made people realise, hang on, Newcastle are back here. Yes, they might not be challenging for it, but they're back here and they're competing again. So, what do you do? Like, you're hardly going to turn around and say, "Oh, do you know what? We're not going to compete in the Champions League. We're just going to we're not going to take it seriously because it's not part of the plan." You're obviously going to put everything into it and hope for the best with injuries. Sadly, that hasn't been the case, and we'll see what happens over the next sort of 5-6 weeks as to how the club manage the situation. The good news is, I think Isak will probably be back by the weekend. He's been training this week. So you've got him back. Barnes is ahead of schedule, should be back soon. So that gives you an option to Gordon. I think Almiron's okay. Sheriff, I think he's an unused sub for Switzerland, so he's going to be fine. So suddenly you've got a few coming back. Yes, you've got your longer terms, like, Botman. That's the one that worries me, like what happens with Botman. And that's why I say to you, perhaps they look to January and think maybe we do need to replace him with a loan.
I think the issue with Botman is we're hearing one thing saying, he's out for this long, then there's been a setback. But then you get more news saying, he's now ahead of schedule. Then once again, it's another setback. Yeah,
I don't think it's a setback. I think they're just trying to avoid him having an operation.
Yeah.
So they're trying to give him enough rest. I think he initially had a setback way back, like the week after he first injured it in that Sheffield United game. I don't think there's been a setback since. I think they're just trying to give it enough rest to avoid, because they know that if they give him an operation, he's going to be probably out the majority of the season. Whereas if they can rest him for another, I think they're just trying to give it every chance to heal itself without having the operation. So I don't think it's a setback as such. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that one, because he's a massive loss. I mean, I think Lascelles has come in and done well.
Great job.
Yeah, but
he's not Botman.
I think we all agree that the team's Botman, because he's left-sided as well, and him and Cher were just, they had such a good partnership together. They're
really well. They were absolutely fantastic. We've mentioned injuries there. Obviously, you'll be at the press conference coming on Friday. It'll be, won't it? Friday morning, Eddie will be doing his press conference for the Chelsea game. What's Eddie Howe's what's his demeanour being like with these injuries? Because I'm not going to lie, that Bournemouth game, when I can't remember which player went down, but a player went down earlier on, and he looked stressed a bit with that.
Yeah.
Like, he was thinking, not another one. I think it might have been Longstaff. Longstaff had a challenge on his ankle.
Yeah.
And him and Tyndall looked stressed a bit with
Well,
it.
I think you will. I mean, it was getting to the stage where you're like, surely no more. Like, what do
Yeah.
we do now? I mean, they had a couple of kids on at the end. Parkinson played, didn't he?
Parkinson
He was
came
probably
on,
not
yeah,
ready.
Miley started the game.
Miley started. Was Miley ready to start? He's just coming back from illness himself. Probably not, but he felt he had to play him. I think with Eddie I think the message he'll want to get across is that, look, we've got enough to cope. I still think we can win the game, because if the players watch the press conference on TV or read his quotes or hear him on the radio and hear him mumping and moaning about it and being down on himself, that's not going to help their performance. So he needs to put on a brave face for the players in the hope that they see it, and for the fans, and probably for himself as well, right? But I think deep down, if he's honest with himself, he'll be like, how have we got ourselves in this position? He'll be looking at the fixture schedule, and he'll be riddled with anxiety. He'll be like, how are we going to get?
Normally when you see these sort of injuries and these amount of injuries at a football club, you start looking at other things and think, how is everybody picking up these sort of injuries? But every injury is different to the other one.
Yeah.
It's not like there's a couple of back injuries in there.
Yeah.
So it's not just muscle injuries, which you would expect from the intensity that lads are playing at the moment.
I mean, they listen, and they do, and he trains him
to the same extent.
Yeah, but they train like they play.
Yeah.
So you know that there might be some people who say, "Well, hang on, are they training too hard? Are they training too much?" But then it's that the way they train that got Newcastle fourth last season,
Exactly,
and beat all these top teams and got in their faces, and as he said against Man United, give them a effing fast game.
Yeah.
And that's because he got them into that condition. And you look at the top teams now, they're all super, super fit. You look at how far Liverpool got with under Klopp, winning the Champions League and playing very similar style of football actually to what Newcastle do at the moment.
Just high pressing intensity.
Yeah, and so it's a delicate situation, but I think the main thing for Newcastle has been the schedule. I think the schedule has been, even before the season started, people say, well, you need to have two players for each position, but they've not really got a batch of youngsters coming in that they can even put on the bit. They've got Miley and then Parkinson, but you look at Man City, they've got young guys that Oscar Bob, who's seen as a youngster coming through, Rico Lewis.
They're seen as well.
Yeah, it looks brilliant. I was at the Scotland-Norway game the other night, and he was the best man on the pitch by a mile. But you look at these guys, they're kids according to the squad, but they can all play in the first team. Whereas you look at Newcastle, other than Miley, they're all quite a bit away.
That was one of the questions, to be fair. Do you feel as if, obviously, under Mike Ashley, that's not ruined our chances, but that it's put that setback massively, because we don't have that academy in the setup with the youth team where they can just step in.
They're ready to go, yeah. That's set the club back now. And also what I touched on earlier about the age of the players and the fact they've been around for a long time and their value. Like, as I say, when the new owners came in with regards to that, they were kind of snookered a little bit. And it's almost like they've been starting halfway back the grid and trying to get their way past. It's not been as easy, and people look at it from outside and they'll say, a lot of my mates in Scotland say, "What, Newcastle spent all this money? How?" No, it's not like that. All the top clubs are all spending that money as well. Yeah. They're all spending that money, but Newcastle didn't have anything to build from. He's done an amazing job with your Longstaffs and your Almirons and your Fabian Schers, guys who look like they're on their way. Done an amazing job, but you can only do that so many times. And I think it's the schedule. I think the schedule's kind of caught up with them. I know it might have something to do with the intensity that they play at and they train at, but what do? Do you suddenly rip it all up again, start again, and say, do you know what? Let's play a slow passing control game, possession game. Let's not get in teams' faces. Then you take away the whole identity of the team.
Exactly that. Yeah.
So it's for Eddie, it must be difficult because he's trying to weigh up the whole thing, and he's probably trying to balance it all. I think as far as he is, I think he will be inside, racking his brains, pulling his hair out at what's going on with the injuries, but he won't want the players, or probably us guys in the media or the fans, to see that he's feeling like that now. And as the face of the club, as the one who sits at the press comments every day, he needs to be the one who puts a brave face on, and listen, he does it very well. Yeah,
he does. You mentioned the clip which we saw from Eddie Howe when it was the Man U game coming up. So that's the 1 in 10 game we're going to give him it. What were your thoughts on the documentary? Amazon Prime documentary, because obviously we went to the premiere, which was at Tyneside Cinema. Do you want my opinion? I'll be honest.
Yeah, you give me yours.
I didn't really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I like certain aspects of it, but I just wanted more.
Yeah. Well, I've watched. There was 4 episodes.
4 episodes.
I've watched 3.
Watched
So
3.
I've not watched the final one.
Okay.
And I keep meaning to watch it, and I've not. Like,
so the final one is obviously going to...
I mean, I've watched about 10 serial killer documentaries since then that I could have finished in Newcastle, I think, but I've watched them. I just found that there was a lot of things in there, and I don't mean this to sound flippant in any way, but there's a lot of things in there that we just kind of see on a daily basis, and it wasn't really new. But I can see why the fans would like it, but there are a lot of things where I was like, oh... I thought some of the bits were good, but it was a little bit of a PR exercise. I felt
that's what I thought.
It reminded me a little bit of the Man City one, which I thought was that. I actually thought, and apologies to all the fans watching this, but I actually thought the Sunderland Till I Die one was because it was gritty and it was real and there was
just fan led, that one, wasn't it?
Yeah,
as well?
fan led, but it was just the cameras were everywhere, whereas obviously they couldn't get everywhere in the Newcastle one. Yes, they got into the dressing room and that was great and whatnot, but it was all to make the owners. It was all to try and make the owners look good, really, wasn't it?
Try to water things down, wasn't it? That's what it was trying to do.
Absolutely. And, you know, if they asked Sky Sports to do it, we wouldn't have done it like that. But, look...
You might not know the answer to this, and it's one of the questions which are being sent in. What was the reaction behind the scenes in regards to the club's point of view that those 3 episodes got released far too early than what they're supposed to? So episode 1 and 2 came out.
Oh, yeah.
Then 3 and 4 came out at the same time. Before schedule was, then obviously
did they take them back down, or
they took them back down after about a day? But everybody had downloaded them on the devices, so they could watch them straight away. And obviously, the big news released that Adidas was going to be next season's sponsor on the back of that.
I don't think they were that bothered. Like, I think they were probably like, "Oh God, I don't think
who's done that?
I don't think it bothered anyone too much.
Yeah,
like
it's out of their hands. It's
I also think,
Amazon's
I also think there's so much going on at the moment that it's probably the least in a line of things to contend with.
Yeah,
you know, just all the FFP stuff and you know the meetings of the Premier League and the Champions League round the corner and organising pre-season. I think there was just so much going on. Trying to sign players, a transfer window, that it was a bit like it probably pissed a couple of people off for like an hour or two, and then it was just forgotten about it.
Yeah.
I feel very much in this job, and what I've seen recently is, I remember under the previous regime, things would get dredged up, and if you made a mistake or I said something on air that annoyed anyone, or you were kind of, it was remembered for a while. Whereas I think with this now, it's such a runaway train, and there's just so much going on that no one's got time to like get.
There's something positive just around the corner.
No one's got time to get annoyed too much. You just need to go with it. Everyone's too busy. Yeah, everyone's too busy to worry about things like that too much, and you've not got the club on to you saying, "Oh, why have you said that?" They're just a bit like, "You say what you want about us. We'll just keep our head down and do our own thing." That's what that's the message we are getting
from a fan's point of view.
Club.
I think what people would have seen from the club, and obviously a lot of fans are just happy with what happens on the field, and that's just kind of what they're happy with. From my point of view, I like looking at other things and what's happening around behind the scenes at the club as well. And you know what the club's done recently with the content which they're putting out as well, and putting bums on seats in those actual jobs as well, rather than just letting Lee and Dan run everything behind the scenes. They've actually got a team behind them as well now.
It's strange the way they've done it. Well, it's not strange. I mean, it doesn't surprise me, but if you think most other clubs, what's the phrase that Darren Eales use? Is it like a, what do you say, like 100-year startup or something? What he meant by that is, you look at the Man City takeover, the Chelsea takeover, like they got their ducks in a row behind the scenes with the people working in commercial departments, the media department, sponsorship, did all that, and then what? Whereas in Newcastle, they've come in because when the takeover happened, the club were in the relegation zone, about to go down to the Championship. So like immediately they just spent money that transfer window. Yeah. Suddenly you've got players in there earning over £100,000 a week, right? So once a few of them were in, they had to keep building. So it's almost like that part's sorted or in the midst of being sorted. Like there's big name players coming in, but behind the scenes at the club, it's still, a lot of the areas are still kind of how it was. Yeah. And it's like they're doing it the other way around, if you know what I mean. So they're not slowly building up. They're just going, bang, there's the players. We need to stay in the division. now Eddie's arrived. Eddie wants these players. We want to get the Champions League. We've got in the Champions League. We want to win a trophy. But if you look behind the scenes, yes, they're slowly getting there. But if you look at the commercial department at the club, the media department, they're starting to bring in new staff now. The media department have like bulked up in recent months. Commercial department are getting bigger because they're having to do more deals. But that it's now been 2 years since the takeover, and it's happening quite slowly. Whereas the football side just improved dramatically.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, I mean, even you look at the stadium.
Yeah.
Like things like the hospitalities, like not like you go to hospitality at Manchester City or Chelsea or Spurs. I mean, it's on a different level to what you get at Newcastle.
They're trying, hence why they've opened the 2 new bars in there. You've got wings and corner rooftops.
I'm going there on Saturday actually, so and then flying to Paris first thing on Sunday morning. So I don't fancy I don't fancy what kind of condition I'm going to be in on Sunday morning. No, but I'm actually going to the game and I'm going to do like a bit of work from there as well. So God knows what my report's going to be like. So they are doing that. But if you were to go hospitality at Spurs, you'd be like blown away by it. Newcastle, but it's just the way they're having it. It's just the way that they've not really got much choice. It's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah.
And
do you think it's because there was that many boxes to be ticked? After obviously Mike Ashley left, that there were so many things that had to be touched, wasn't it?
He dragged the club down.
Yeah.
You know, he was running the club like a lower end championship club. I mean, the training ground. People talk about the training ground, and yes, it's had a facelift now, but I tell you, it hasn't in the press room down the bottom. And we still go to that place every day, and you're like, "What is this?" Like honestly, it's just like I can't believe I've spent 10 years of my life going there every Friday.
Do you see more people in the press room now?
Yeah,
Is it a lot busier now?
Yeah. I mean, it was always busy anyway because Newcastle's always had an interest. There's always been something about, even when things weren't going well, it was always a story because there was always something happening, wasn't there?
There's always that mall.
Yeah.
Oh, remember the mall?
Yeah.
Leaking all the news.
Yeah. But now, I mean, there's probably, for a regular game, for a regular Friday, there's probably about like 25 of us in the room, which is, I mean, I was at Leeds today and there was only 5 people there.
Right, okay.
I know Leeds are in the Championship, but even when Newcastle were in the Championship, they were still probably getting 15 people coming because there was still this attraction with Newcastle. There was still always something happening. There was always
more of a media circus beforehand, wasn't it?
Yeah.
To a certain degree.
Well, everyone was just taking a bit of a kick at the club, weren't they? Whereas now they can't really do that as much.
Has it upgraded the mics yet? In the press conference? Was there still no mic?
In the training ground.
I know Eddie's got one.
Training ground in the stadium.
In the training ground.
Well, no, they don't have a mic.
That's what I mean. They need one. Like they need one.
So
because you go and listen to the press conference, you hear Eddie.
So that's all. So that's all.
Andy Sixsmith shouting his tits off.
Yeah.
And
everyone else whispering. Yeah. Well, he does sit beside me, and Andy's so loud that he normally wakes me up on a Friday morning. So that all you're hearing that through Eddie Howe's mic.
That's what I mean. It's
You're hearing that. So if we're sat there on the other side of the cameras there, you're picking up my voice from there, and it's a Friday morning, and sometimes I can't be bothered, and I'm just like whisper. And you go to Leeds today. So sorry, I keep saying this, but just for example, because I was there today at Leeds today, and they've got a nice new press room, and you go in and there's a roving mic. So the roving mic just cuts out. There's a bit of a like pass, and sometimes a bit of a gap between it getting passed and whatever, and a bit of silence, but it gets passed, and you would hear every single question getting asked. And when we do the Champions League games, you'll probably notice you can hear every question getting asked. Yeah. But in there, they don't have that. But
this is what I want, because that's sort of content from the club. If I can listen to Eddie Howe's press conference as a podcast, that's what I want.
So it doesn't matter if you lose, you get beat 4-0 off Chelsea at the weekend, want that. As long as you can hear the press conference.
I want a microphone in the press room. I've mentioned it for years.
Well, listen, I've been in the room. I don't know if you've been in it yourself. I'm not sure that room is compatible with a microphone. Why don't you actually you should have the press conferences in here. This would work well.
Yeah, we could. We'll get Eddie in.
Just get Eddie, get a player sat next to each other here, get the cameras. Honestly, this room's probably actually bigger than the room there.
Speaking of press conferences, were you in the press conference with Arteta after that Arsenal game?
No.
Well, you're not.
Do you know what? It's the one game I've not done this season.
You weren't there?
I went up to Scotland because it was Hearts Rangers semi-final, and I got asked to go up and do that. And I
would love to know how awkward that was.
Well, I've watched it back. I don't think it was that awkward. You know, I actually
it was intense though, wasn't it?
I don't think the journalists really get awkward. Yeah. Feel awkward. Like honestly, particularly print guys. Like I think was it Luke? I think it was Luke Edwards who asked the first couple of questions. It would have actually probably been me asking the first couple had it been there.
I kept on going.
But I think it was Luke. But I think if you're a journalist, you realise that he's trying to say something, and when they say something like that, you're like, oh, he's got more in him here. Let's keep pressing his buttons. And I think that was all Luke was doing. And I think I don't think these guys. I don't think the newspaper reporters really feel awkward. I think I sometimes do a little bit, but I honestly don't think they do, and especially when it's someone like Arteta, who they don't. So it was Luke, who's a journalist for the North East, covers Newcastle. I think if it was Eddie, he'd probably feel a bit like, oh, I have to see this guy every week. Whereas Arteta, he's only seen twice a season, so he's just like, just leave it out there. So now I wasn't there, but I've watched it back. But look, he wanted to say that. He said the exact same thing in his TV interview to Sky, and then his interview to PLP.
It's like copy and paste everything.
Yeah, it was the exact same. So no one had to try hard to get. He wanted to come in and say it. No one had to try hard. That was his message, and that's what he wanted to say. The harder ones are when you know someone doesn't want to say something, but you're trying to push them to say it. And if it's someone you like, then you feel bad about it. And if it's someone you don't like, then you're like, this could get nasty. That's the. Whereas I feel with the Arteta thing, like Luke was almost just facilitating it. They were just like,
just entertaining him.
Just give him a bit more, and he was just like,
I'll give you what you want.
Yeah, he just kept going. Yeah, he wanted to say that.
I'm going to end on one final question because we've been going for 50 minutes there. So a lot of talk about transfers. The majority of questions which have been in, well, just in relation to transfers, which there always are. But do you think that with the injuries which we've seen now to Isak and Callum Wilson,
I'll just change the question. Who are we signing in January? That's what you're asking.
Yeah, that is a lot of questions. But I think a lot of people are looking at, because of obviously the suspension to Denali, people are looking at that centre midfield position. Then obviously Neves was linked, etc. Do you think the club might have to now look at that striking position as well? Because it's not the first time, it won't be the last time both of these lads have injuries.
I've been asking myself the same question. I honestly don't think it's I don't think it's a priority, because I think he sees Gordon as someone who can play through the middle. Has he been was he that great in the couple of games he's played there against Dortmund?
Did a job, but
I just think the team's weaker without him on the left.
Yeah, 100%. I agree.
If it was me, I always think you need to go with three strikers. Look, we spoke to Eddie about this at length, and Dan Ashworth, and he said the reason we didn't bring in a third striker is we didn't have the funds to do that, and we thought it was more important that we brought in a central midfielder in the shape of Tonali, and then these fullbacks who they saw a window of opportunity with Livramento, Southampton having been relegated, and they saw, right, this is our chance to get him. And then with Howe, they knew that Chelsea had to sell to facilitate the amount of money they were spending. They saw a window of opportunity there, and they acted on it. And look, these two lads might end up being the right and left backs for England in 4 or 5 years' time. We might not, but they might. I mean, Livramento especially looks very, very good, I think.
It does.
I think the frustrating thing for Newcastle is he plays the same position as the captain, you know, who's had
an absolutely phenomenal time at Newcastle.
Yeah, you're not going to not play. I would try and find, if it was me, I would try and find a way to get Livramento in the team. And whether it's playing Trippier at left back or playing Livramento at left, I would try and get him in the team, especially with Dan Burn out injured.
He does look quality though, doesn't he?
Really good, very good, very good. I mean, it's just the way that goal against Man United, the way he kind of just ghosted past like 3 players, and then not even that, was the weight of the pass into Almiron as well. And I've interviewed him a couple of times, and he's got this kind of real, it's not arrogance, but this real sort of steely confidence that you're like, this guy's going to go well. He really believes in himself, really believes in himself. Where you don't see that a lot with some players these days. Some of them are a bit kind of, but you can see he's going to go. He's going to go far. So, in terms of a striker, look, I think there's a chance that the club will bring in a forward, another forward. And what I mean, I don't mean like another number 9. I think there's a chance that we might see someone who can play across the front. Like I still think that wide right position's a little bit weak with just Murphy and Almiron. Yeah. Obviously, Murphy being injured, Almiron picks up a few injuries. He needs 2 players for that position. My worry is you get to January and, you know, the whole situation looks a lot different with regards to Europe, Carabao Cup. Look, you'll still be in the FA Cup and you've got the league to go for. I think a lot depends on where the club are. I mean, if you're still in Europe there, suddenly you need quite a few players in January.
You need bodies, yeah.
Yeah, you do. But if you're out of Europe, things aren't quite as desperate. I think there'll be an attempt to get a forward in. I'm not saying it will be an out-and-out number 9, a la Callum Wilson, but someone like an Isak that can play, you know, across the front 3, a anti-Gordon type thing. I think they will try and bring in a midfielder because they've looked light in midfield. Great getting Joe Willock back. I think I can't believe how good he's been given how long he's been out. But I think getting him back, I mean, he's arguably my first name on the team sheet.
I always forget how good Willock is.
Yeah.
When he's not there, then when he's back
So good.
playing, you stop and think, he is great.
That game he came back, that first game back against Dortmund when he came on early, I was watching him, like, he did 2 no-look passes within, he'd only been back on the pitch for 5 minutes. And then the way he took that goal against Man United, and you know, he's getting a second win now. Like he hit the, you know, he really went for it when he came back. Hit the ball the way against Manchester United. It was just like he just struck it into the bottom corner, and he just kind of, for me, it looks effortless with him at times. And I think he's come back really strong. There might be a little bit of a fall off for the next sort of couple of weeks while he tries to find his feet and gets a second win. But I think having him back is a huge boost. Yeah. You've got Joe Linton in there, who's obviously, you know, what you're going to get from him, and Bruno. I still don't feel Bruno's 100%. He's not quite got back to his...
We've said the same since on a Monday show that we do. It always looks like he's in his ankle with Bruno.
I wasn't sure whether maybe his nose had been put out of joint a little bit by Tonali's arrival, but since Tonali's been away, he's kind of been the same. He's good, don't get me wrong, but he's a bit like, he's a 7 out of 10 every week at the moment, whereas when he first came, he was like a 9 out of 10 every week, and he's...
Do you not think that's just because everybody else up around him stepped up that
it might be, but I just think he's getting caught a little bit in possession, and I just thought he was playing with a different charisma, I thought, last season to what he is this. But look, that can change quickly. All it takes is one good game and suddenly you're flying again, you know? So I think they'll try and bring in another midfielder, even though Willock's back. I just think you need a holder in there, and I think Tonali's a huge loss. The other interesting one would be defence, and we've touched on it already, and there's technically only 3 central defenders there in the shape of Botman, Scher and Lascelles. Yes, Paul Dummett's come in and played in those games, but I don't think he looks like he's going to play him probably in the league. So Dan Burn could play in there, but he's injured. So I think another central defender is desperately needed.
Do you think it's going to be more looking on the loan market though?
I think so. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe there was one purchase. So Dan Ashworth said in his interview a couple of weeks ago, he said, look, you know, we're kind of at our limits for FFP for this window in January. But like Anthony Gordon last year, if the right player came up at the right price, we can move it forward. We can move a piece of business forward. So they did that with Gordon. So that is an option. So I wouldn't be surprised if they managed to get one player in. And I don't think Eddie Howe's, I don't think he's desperate for loans. If you look at it so far, other than Matt Targett, he's not really loaned anyone. Yes, the Lewis Hall thing is a loan, but that we know that's going to be permanent.
Yeah, it's obligation.
It's obligation, so that's definitely going to become permanent. So
what about the lads that have gone out on loan? Obviously, you weren't involved, but you followed Minty when he went on loan to Scotland, didn't you? He's at.
Oh no, that was the other one.
It was on Minty that he was.
Oh no, it was God, that's terrible. The Aussie lad, Cool.
Sorry, yes, it was.
Yeah.
So Minty is in Feyenoord.
Yeah.
Option to bring him back?
Yeah, well, he was asked about that. I got the impression, reading between the lines, that maybe doesn't quite feel he's ready. But then if he's scoring for Feyenoord, I would suggest that he probably is ready.
Yeah, featuring Champions League games as well.
Yeah. They might bring him back just to have another option, because he's out with the 23-man squad as well, because he's a youngster, so that might be an option. But I still think they'll look to probably bring in one forward, irrespective of the situation with him. I just think they want someone who's experienced enough that can come in and, you know, they know what they're going to get from him, whereas they might not feel they can get that from him just yet. What a brilliant name, Minty.
Unreal, isn't it? It's unreal. He does look like he's doing well over there, but like you said, Premier League's a whole different ball game as well.
I just think this January transfer window now, with the news yesterday from the Premier League meeting, that I just think it changes the face of it now, and I just think this is a window of opportunity, if you pardon the pun, for Newcastle to go out and do something here, because there's every chance that come the summer this might not be allowed now.
Yeah.
And then there might be a ban in place.
Might have to take advantage of it whilst it's there.
This is what I mean. There's a window of opportunity now, and I think it would be remiss in Newcastle not to try and strengthen while they can. I know they won't want to hugely piss anyone off too much, but, you know, if they were to go out and get a couple of loan players in, you know, for argument's sake, if it was like a Neves and a Gabriel Vega, these guys aren't going to come in and win Newcastle the league, but they're going to strengthen the team, and I think that, you know, they're within the the rules by doing that. So, look, I'm looking forward to the January transfer window now because I think there'll be quite a lot to talk about.
You'll actually be back in Newcastle because there's a few seasons where you weren't even there, wasn't there?
Yeah, actually, on deadline day, you mean?
Yeah, on deadline day.
Well,
yeah.
you say that, but in the last deadline day in August, there I ended up at Sunderland. Did you? Well, because I knew all the business was done 2 days early, deadline day, and I think Sunderland brought in 4 players, and I just phoned my desk and said, "I'm going to go over to Sunderland here." And I drove over, and they suddenly had 4 players arriving. Now,
forget about that when we side with you, don't they?
Yeah, I know. Well, I got over there and. Yeah, I got over there and they were like, "What are you doing over here? You know how you do it." Never keep you guys happy. So anyway, yeah, but they signed 4 players and it was interesting. Like, doesn't even just signing players, doesn't matter how big names they were, you know. But for Newcastle, I don't think they'll leave it to the last minute. I just don't think that's the way they like to do it. But what they should probably do is have a couple of players ready to go on the 1st of January. Bang, press the button and go. Do you know what I mean? They've got this relationship with the 4 Saudi clubs owned by PIF, so they shouldn't be scrapping around at the end of the window. They should be in a position to say, right, if the player wants to come, we'll reach an agreement, a financial agreement with the club to loan them. Yes, we'll come up with some kind of loan deal that's going to be favourable for Newcastle. And they should really be in a place in the 1st or 2nd of January to go bang, there we go, they're in, and then you get them for the whole of the month as well.
Yeah, I think that's something which we always never used to do under the previous ownership as well. It was always last minute, if anything. And then, like I said, it's a full month gone straight away.
Yeah.
But fingers crossed, it's plenty of business, and because we need it. We need a few bodies, especially with the injury concerns.
But these are good problems.
They are good problems.
As Darren Neal said, champagne problems, aren't they? Like, we're sitting here going, "Oh, who are you going to sign in January?" But look, we're talking about you're talking about who we're going to sign in January, right? We're worried about the injury crisis, okay? But you've got players coming back and good players in the shape of Isak and Barnes. You've got a Champions League game away this time in 6 days' time against Paris Saint-Germain, Mbappe and co. Right?
Teach them a lesson again.
Still in the group, still in the Carabao Cup. You've knocked out Manchester City and Manchester United. Okay, you got Chelsea at home on Saturday. Probably the favourites. You're probably the favourites to win the game, and you're still in a strong position in the Premier League. And you imagine that two and a half years ago.
It's all going well.
I know, but I think sometimes it's easy for fans of any club, to be like, "Oh," because you're just worried about the next window, or the next game, or the next. But when you actually, and listen, I'm not saying the fans don't do this, because any fan you speak to are still, especially when you go into the pub after the game, they're all still even if it's a defeat or a draw, they're still like, "Wow, this is just amazing."
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's taking it for granted. I think everyone's still enjoying the ride, and these are not bad problems to have. They're good ones, and the injury situation will sort itself out in due course.
Of course it will. Thanks everybody that has joined us tonight for this question and answer. Fans, thank you if you had sent questions in. I apologise if I haven't gone through them all. I've tried to just bundle as many together as possibly can, because there was a lot of the same when it came to transfers. Thanks, Keith, for joining me there tonight.
No worries.
Well, been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
As always. If you do like the video, just like it. It's all we ask. Become a subscriber. It costs you nothing to do that. If you are listening to the audio, because this will be released afterwards as an audio as well, just give us a 5-star rating as well. If you want to give a little bit extra back, it is just $2.99 a month. Become a member. You get extra videos. You get early access to videos. You get access to the Telegram group as well. We'll see you next time. See you later.